I'm going to divide my writing experience in two, really, and I think one half of my writing life, it's totally transformed it in a very positive way, which is my journalistic writing endeavour. That has been totally transformed. The availability of information, the ability to access opinions, to engage in instant debate with readers and experts in every part of the world is just extraordinary. And I was thinking about how difficult it would be to access some of this information. Even 20 years ago, how difficult it was to get hold of books that were out of print 20 years ago, and now, you know, if you want to read a classic 19th century novel, even if it hasn't been in print since the 19th century, there it is online. It's not great for reading purposes if you're like me, but there it is. There are all sorts of ways in which, you know, the online presence just transforms the availability of texts to you. Recently, I wrote a book of non-fiction about handwriting, and my editor said what would be wonderful would be to have a chapter in this about what a couple of major writers thought about handwriting. And I thought, Dickens, of course. You know, Dickens is I'm sure there's things in Dickens. Now, 20 years ago, you would have had to read whatever, is there 15 novels, 15 full-length novels, making notes all the way. You might phone some people up. You know, you might do all sorts of mad things. Now, as a beginning to research, not the complete body of research, it is possible to call up all the novels and carry out a text search. Now, it was just incredible what turned up if I just searched through 15 novels with the words writing. It was just extraordinary what showed up. Of course, that's not the limit of everything that Dickens had to say, and I did enhance that with a lot of old-fashioned reading, but it transformed the research experience. So the journalistic writing, the access to raw information experience is an unmixed blessing, I would say. For me, it is a challenge to reconcile the digital experience with the patterns of thought that are required to write fiction. And I personally can't write fiction in the day after I've checked my emails or been on Facebook or started a search on the internet. And I have an absolutely strict rule that I don't go on the internet until after I've finished my day's creative work. So, you know, I work early in the morning, so that makes things a little bit easier for me. But if I've noticed that if I can't resist it, and I know there's something interesting in the news, and I do a little kind of search before, I think, I'll just do it before I start work, then that's the day's work gone. It just won't happen. And I've struggled with this. I don't think it will be the case for people who grew up with digital forms and with the online world. I think that the mentality is much more harmonious in people for whom it's always been familiar. But my creative parts, my mental creative parts, are in a way a little bit out of sync with that, and the digital world does kind of interrupt that kind of concentrated creative thinking. So it's a two-part experience, interestingly. I'm a great believer in mixed economies in all aspects of our lives. I think that if you think about the way in which we eat, we don't have a single mode of eating. We sometimes we have a terrible takeaway delivered to us by some poor wage slave. Sometimes we cook something from scratch, scraping carrots for the person we love. Sometimes we go out to a restaurant, sometimes we go out for a pizza. Sometimes we can't quite be bothered, but we're going to eat at home, so we have a supermarket ready meal. It's a mixed economy. I think that as a practicing writer, you probably have a bit of a duty, if you can afford it, to buy other writers' new hardback books. I do think that, and also I've got a bit of a principle that I will buy books. I will buy books at the full price because that makes such a difference to a writer now. Because even very small numbers can make a big difference to an author. Only 3% of books published sell more than 1,000 copies. You can make a large difference to most authors by buying one copy of a hardback book. You can make an even bigger difference if you really love that author by posting a review of his or her book on Amazon, or even sending them a postcard. I think the slightly depressing thing, I do find this depressing, is that I can see the possibility of all publishing turning into a sort of tooth and claw market where everything is self-published first on Kindle and for 99p for a volume, and then if it does well, if it finds a readership, if there's word of mouth transformation, then Penguin or Fourth Estate or somebody will pick that up and bring it out, maybe under their own imprint, maybe even on paper. I'm not so mad on that. I think there's going to be a place for that. I think that some great novels are going to emerge like that. But there's also the point that a lot of great novelists, they don't explode through the acclaim of a public. They're brought to a public by a publisher, an editor of quite sophisticated taste, saying, I love this author, it's so clever, it's so brilliant, it's not like anything you've seen before. I'm going to bring it to a publisher. Think again of Hilary Mantel. I mean, Hilary Mantel's novels for years, I don't know how many novels she's written, 12 or 13. They were selling in the hundreds or low thousands for years until Wolf Hall pretty well. I mean, Beyond Black did quite well, but it wasn't on this kind of scale. And still, the editors were saying, we believe in this woman, we are going to invest in her. You must read this great novel, The Giant O'Brien, which sold, I don't know how many copies, not very many. Now, how is that sort of author going to emerge in future? Now, if we imagine, Hilary publishing her first novel on Kindle and 20 people hear of it, and another one, maybe 25 people hear of it. I mean, you're asking quite a lot of the human spirit to self-publish 11 novels with no professional support, no kind of critical acclaim, no belief in themselves, and then finally to explode with a novel about Tudors. And it's difficult to see what would replace that. I suspect that what would replace that is a series of one-hit wonders. I'm on Facebook, but actually I don't contact with my readers on Facebook, and actually I rather resent it when they sometimes write to me and say, I admire your writing so much, and by the way, could you give me a quote for my volume of short stories, which I'm publishing myself on Kindle. This is where I talk to my mum. You know. Twitter, I'm on my third round of engagement with Twitter, and it's ended very badly every time, which is the... I think if you're I think if you write for newspapers in particular, and you engage with particular subjects, it's very easy for you to get contacted, and really beyond anything that people would say to you in person. And I normally put up with it, but once or twice I've been so enraged by things that it's got completely out of hand, and I've had to leave the thing. In the old days, before the internet, I used to have this tactic for the occasional mad letter you used to get. You know, I see you're writing about gay rights. Well, I hope you get AIDS and die. You know, and which is kind of fantastic to get on a Saturday morning. Well, my tactic then used to, for some reason, against most people's views, most of these letters are signed, and quite often they give their address. So I just used to phone these people up. I said, I see that you've written to me saying that you hope I die of AIDS soon. Why would you say this to a stranger? And of course, actually, that was rather a brilliant thing, because they don't think of you as a human being. They think of you as just a kind of, you know, the voice of Murdoch or something. But you can't do that anymore, because I've discovered if you write back on Twitter, then it escalates. So it is a problematic sort of space. How to engage with readers? I think that it's a very good thing to engage with readers, particularly with journalism. With novels, it's always going to be a bit of a slower business because, of course, you know, people often write to you. Somebody wrote to me about a novel that I published in 1994, and saying the one thing I didn't understand was why you made this character. I was like, oh, for heaven's sake! I mean, it's very sweet of you to ask, but I was 26 years old. I just can't remember. You know, so thank you very much. But it's a sort of engagement which is very nice. It's very nice to have. You're very flattered that anyone is reading a book that you published 20 years ago. But I don't think you can be of a lot of help to those readers. I've got the problem, which I don't know whether it's a common problem, but I think it's quite a widespread one among novelists. I can never remember my characters' names. I always think of them as kind of plot functions. So I say, oh, it's the narrator's sister, or it's the agent of the breakup, or something. But I can't remember that the woman's called Rodney. It's challenge me. I would love to have an engagement with readers that is as nice and as productive and as engaging as the sort of engagements that you can have at literary festivals and at readings in particular. If it was possible to have that sort of conversation, a genuine conversation, online, then I think that would be a great step forward.